Okay, we ready to get started? Can you hear me? Okay. So just remind everyone, if you would please, to stay muted during the service unless you're speaking, and then we'll reconvene afterwards to socialize a bit. So good morning to all, and welcome to the Kachara Chapel Cyber Service. We want to say hi each Sunday, so please put a hello comment in that chat window down at the bottom of the screen, and we can all welcome one another. And I'd also add, if you have a prayer request for someone, and we'll certainly want one in there for Diane today, that you place that in there and we'll make sure they're remembered by our prayer team. Our musical guest today is Elder Roya, and next week, Elder Roya will lead us in song. And as a general reminder, we do have chapel expenses, even though we aren't meeting at the chapel all through the winter months. When you are considering your giving plan, please consider the Kachara Chapel offerings may be sent by mail to the post office box or by clicking the donate button on the website. You can direct your giving to the general fund, the memorial fund, or our scholarship fund by clicking on the optional use this donation for drop-down box. As you can see, we've gone high-tech. Thank you for your generous support of our wonderful chapel. Again, let's stay silent through all this. And in terms of other announcements, does anyone else have another pressing announcement? Okay, I'll add one more if I may. Any that get the local paper will have seen an article this week about the American Legion holding a blood drive on Tuesday of this coming week in Walsenburg. And it's desperately needed given the COVID shut-ins. Apparently, Children's Hospital in Denver had a blood shortage, I think it was last week, and caused some real problems up there. So they're begging for O negatives, and both Peg and I are O negative universal donors, so they're calling us. So anyway, if you can, it would be a good thing to participate in. I think they test you as well, so you'll get test results. So just something to consider. So in our call to worship, please join by reading what's on the screen in terms of a response. And I'll start. We have needed the light of Christ as it shines through our darkest moments. We have seen the light of God as it illuminates the joys and blessings in our lives. We have felt the light of the Spirit as it moves and guides us on our path. Let us worship God together.
Thank you so much, Jim. And now our opening hymn is number 449, Day by Day, and Elder Royer is leading us today.
Day by day, and with each passing moment, strength I find to meet my trials here, trusting in my Father's wise bestowment. I've no cause for worry or for fear. He whose heart is kind beyond all measure gives unto each day what he deems best. Lovingly, it's part of pain and pleasure, mingling toil with peace and rest. Every day the Lord himself is near me with a special your promises, O Lord, that I lose not faith's sweet consolation. Offer me within your holy word. Help me, Lord, when toil and trouble meeting, ere to take as from a father's hand, one by one, the days, the moments fleeting, till I reach the promised land.
The daily word for today is my help. My help comes from the Lord. No difficulty is beyond solution. No unwanted condition or circumstance is binding. No situation is unsolvable when I remember that our help comes from the Lord. Nothing is impossible to understand, to overcome, to change when we lift our consciousness to the level of God consciousness. When we remember from whence comes our help, when we remember the power of God, when we seek and accept the help of God. Life is for abundant living, for full, joyous expression, for realization of our oneness with God, and for expressing the Christ Spirit within us. As we lift our consciousness, our horizons expand. We have a broader view. We see everything more clearly. We see the beauty, the wonder, and the marvels of life. We see solutions. We are better able to express the best that is within us, and we prosper in health, happiness, and creativity. And from Psalms 121, verses 1 to 2, from whence does my help come? My help comes from the Lord.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Jim. And thank you, Elda, for your participation this morning. We really appreciate you being here. So let us take a moment to pray. Our loving God, as we take a deep breath, we feel your comfort and peace. You lift us up by your strength and mercy. Your Holy Spirit calls us to the peaceful center within our hearts where we feel your presence. If we face a challenge or must make a decision today, we remember your Son Jesus, who said of himself he could do nothing. We too turn to you and your Holy Spirit for guidance in everything we think, feel, say, and do today. You lift us by your healing love. In your presence, we feel whole and healthy in mind, body, and spirit. Your healing power is at work in us now, assuring our strength, energy, and vitality. Your divine life renews every cell of our bodies. We are wondrously made by your infinite love, and we are deeply grateful. We turn our awareness now to those we hold in prayer. We join together as a community of faith and compassion as we say their names out loud, and particularly remembering the Middlebrook family, the Severns family, Diane, Margaret, first responders, firefighters, healthcare workers, hospital chaplains, all those affected by illness, and for our local, state, national, and world leaders. And for all those who are coming into our minds and hearts, we ask you, Father, to protect them and guide them and strengthen them and encourage them. And we release all those for whom we pray into your care, knowing that your love for them is already whole and perfect and complete. In the name and through the nature of your Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen. Now let us say the Lord's Prayer together.
Oops. Sorry.
Not Jim's spreadsheet.
I don't know
Okay,
how it got to there.
here we go. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our offenses, as we have forgiven our offenders. And leave us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And now let's listen to Elda singing special music today called Precious Lord, Take My Hand.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storms, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When the way grows dear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear my cry, hear my call, hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, and I am worn.
Scripture readings today. First, from 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 through 18. So we do not lose heart, even though our outer nature is wasting away. Our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure, because we look not at what can be seen, but at what cannot be seen. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal. And from John 1, verses 35 to 42. The next day, John again was standing with two of his disciples. And as he watched Jesus walk by, he exclaimed, "Look, here is the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him say this, and they followed Jesus. When Jesus turned and saw them following, he said to them, "What are you looking for?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him that day. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated anointed. And he brought Simon to Jesus, who looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You are to be called Cephas," which is translated as Peter.
Thank you, Jim. And a thank you to Elda for Precious Lord, Take My Hand as well. We're in the second in a 4-week series based on a book by Ron Pevny called Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. And it's about bringing awareness into this stage of our lives, whatever this stage is for us. It's geared toward people who are preparing for retirement or are already in retirement. So we're not going to work every day, but or we may still be working. Some of us, just keep working. And and we know that as we're entering this phase of our lives, we need to financially prepare for this next chapter. We know that we need to physically prepare. We need to eat right, get plenty of sleep, take our vitamins, exercise, and we know that these physical things need to be done. But then the author says, but are we preparing mentally and spiritually for this phase of our lives? And he likens this particular chapter in our lives with elders of indigenous cultures. And he says that in our current time, we don't give much meaning to the elders of our culture. We just become old people, but we don't really prepare to be an elder. And elders in these cultures have historically been the storytellers, the healers, those who keep the traditions and the meaning of the traditions and the meaning of the rituals and pass that on to the next generation. So in this author also, when we're not in a pandemic, he holds retreats on coaching people to become an elder, not only in their communities, but also for themselves, to get in touch with that inner wisdom that each of us have, and to bring forth that wisdom in the form of our passions and our gifts in this stage of our lives, because our passions in this stage are different than our passions when we were in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and maybe even 60s. So with this process of conscious living and conscious aging for this stage of our lives, we're becoming aware of what is purposeful for us now, and maybe how we can give back to the world in a meaningful way now that we're in a different stage of life than we were when we were younger, building our careers, getting our education, raising our families, and so forth. Whatever it was, whatever those steps were that we took up until now, were more about doing than being. And we're able to take this time now to get into being, not only as a presence of God's unconditional love, but really getting in touch with our inner world. We finally have time in this stage of our development to become aware that we are not merely physical beings. We are also spiritual beings. St. Paul talked about that in his letter to the Corinthians, and when he said, what you see, we're all lamenting, and as we get older, I hear not this group, but I hear other people saying it's hell to get old. My body's just not cooperating anymore. But St. Paul is saying, well, don't worry about that. Get in touch with your inner life. Your inner life is eternal. It's more real than the physical life. What we see will pass, but who we are remains forever. We are eternal beings. And once we make that bridge in our consciousness, once we go from our lives up until now, building a physical reality in our experience, and we make that bridge into our spiritual reality, the spiritual reality we will find will be even richer than the physical reality. The spirituality, once these bodies lay down for the last time, we continue on. And that is what St. Paul is telling us in that first reading. And then I love this gospel story. Jesus is starting to collect his disciples, but it's a very different version than what we usually hear in the other gospel stories. Usually Jesus walks by the Sea of Galilee, and he does the come hither to the guys that he wants to collect as his disciples. So usually he's going down, he calls to Peter, he calls to Andrew, they drop their fishing nets that they've been mending, and they leave their dad, who just lost his retirement plan because his beefy boys have taken off with some stranger to do God knows what. So the minute they drop their fishing nets, their dad's retirement plan is gone. He's got to work for the rest of his life. And he was planning for things, just like we plan for things. And something happens in our life that says, oh no, what you thought was going to happen isn't going to happen. So we're familiar with the story of Jesus calling the disciples that way. This story is very different. We have John the Baptist again with his disciples, with his followers. And as we talked about last week and in December, John the Baptist represents our intellectual selves, our rational thinking personal mind that is on the track of understanding our spiritual nature and our communion with God, but it's still dominated by our personality selves with all of its judgments and condemnations and I know what's best for you. But Jesus isn't like that. So when John notices Jesus and says, oh, here's the Lamb of God, two disciples leave John. We're seeing a change in consciousness again. We're leaving our intellectual understanding of God, of the nature of God, of the love of God, and we're shifting toward the true Messiah, the anointed one. We're following the anointed one because we want to develop our spiritual attributes and live in and of the love of God. So we see these two disciples departing from John to follow Jesus. Come follow me. He said, come and see the goodness of the Lord. So we see one of those disciples, Andrew, who who has a brother, Simon. So Andrew, the name Andrew means strong man. And that's easy for us to grasp intellectually, because being a fisherman, he better be brawny. He needed to haul those nets filled with fish onto the deck of his fishing boats. And so you can imagine that he and his brother are big, brawny, beefy guys. And so the strong man, we get this idea of strength with Andrew because his name means strong man. And then it also means determination, steadfastness, a willingness to keep on target, to keep on track with whatever you're pursuing, whatever your vision is, whatever you know your calling to be. So Andrew, the strength, this determination, is the one who follows Jesus first. And then he goes to get his brother. His brother's name is Simon, which means receptivity. It also means hearing, and it means a willingness to obey. So he gets his brother, and because of Simon's name, we can understand that to be our openness at this phase of our lives, our openness and our willingness to be receptive to our inner journey, to our willingness to follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And then when Andrew brings Simon to Jesus, Jesus says, "Oh, son of John, Simon, son of John, your name is going to be Cephas now," which means the rock. Now, Cephas, Peter, the rock. Now, okay, here's my bias. The message of Peter throughout the New Testament is one of developing faith. Sometimes Peter is as dumb as a box of rocks. Jesus has to keep telling him and telling him and telling him and telling him. He's, this willingness of the Simon aspect of Peter, his willingness to be receptive is a big plus. But over and over and over, Peter needs to understand. He's just not getting it. And he, over in the stories, sometimes he has these moments of insight. Don't we all? We have these moments of insight when oh yes, I absolutely get what she's talking about. The unconditional love of God is flowing through me, and I feel that benevolence for everyone. And then there are other times, and I'll use my I statements, there are other times that I look at the news and I say, how can those people be so ridiculous? And then I go, that's God's child too. So we see this continuing evolution of faith in Peter. So we can take Simon Peter to represent our personal willingness to be open to the guidance of Spirit, being willing to obey the voice of God, and to develop our faith in and of the love of God for all humankind, for all creation. So, I rag on Peter a lot, but really, he's the only disciple that walked on water. He's the only other being in the Bible besides Jesus who walked on water. So when we see this evolution of faith that goes beyond what Paul describes as our physicality, what we can see with our physical eyes, Peter got it. He got it for a minute, but he got it. So that's our job too, to look past physical reality to the spiritual reality of all of life that underscores everything, that breathes our bodies, because the spiritual nature of each one of us is the truth of us. Now, we don't always relate to it. We don't always live from it. But in those moments of inspiration that we do, we like Peter, we get it. We understand this. It's like the light bulb goes off. And then we come back to our habitual thinking, but then we have another moment of inspiration and another moment of, oh, awareness. We're all together in this awareness of God. And that, when we get to the point where we understand that is the truth of us, the reality of us, life is just a little better. Our experiences are happier and more loving, and joy springs up from us, for no reason at all. We live with a sense of joy and unconditional love, and we can look at whatever the behaviors are that are going on around us. We can look at them as if they're children learning their boundaries. They're children who are exploring not only the world that they can see with their eyes, but perhaps will leave the door open that they're also exploring their inner world, the one that is more real than the physical world. So that brings me to the book Conscious Living, Conscious Aging, and his discussion on elderhood. The indigenous people, the culture of the indigenous peoples that we have gotten away from in contemporary society was all about developing that inner world. The elders of the communities were responsible for the spiritual direction of the community. They were responsible for the traditions, the meanings behind the traditions and the rituals. They spent their lives developing their inner world so that they could better guide and better mediate in the outer world. So they had the responsibility of the spirituality of the community. And that's where he's bringing us, the author Ron Pevny, is bringing us back into that tradition of elderhood. And he asks us to take that inner journey, which we started last week. We started with the homework assignment, and I hope you all were able to do at least a little bit of that timeline, that history of yours in the 7-year segments, and to really look at the events, the major events and the minor events that occurred, and how we reacted to these different things. And did we learn anything from these major events and these minor events? We all have a history, we all have a story, we all have wonderful things that happened to us, and we all had terrible things that happened to us. And yet here we are today. So what did we learn from these happy moments? What did we learn from these not as happy major life events in our lives? Did we draw on the spiritual inner world? Because in these times, especially of crises in our lives, these major events, as elders, we draw on our inner world, on our spiritual nature to help. And as we're drawing on these, we remember the two brothers. We remember Simon Peter, who is open and receptive to hearing God's voice and with a faith and trust, because he's our example of developing faith in God. And then we have Andrew with that determination and that strength of purpose and that strength of character that will act on spiritual guidance. So those two brothers in the Bible stories for us act together as a team because they're brothers. So we have this developing faith and this determination to follow through on God's guidance. So in this elder role, in these life events that we're watching, whether they're major events like graduation or a wedding or retirement or the death of a loved one, these events, or if something happens to, I have a friend who is a classic orphan archetype. She has an orphan archetype in her demeanor. And what that means is she never fit in with her family. Never fit in with her family. They view the sky as cyan, and she views the sky as baby blue. And they'll fight about the difference between cyan and baby blue. All of her siblings and her parents are in agreement with what life should be. And she looks at life and says, no, I don't think so. And then the fight is on. So she just doesn't fit in her family. But because of all of these events in her life, she has the opportunity to go within and say, what is the gift of this orphan energy that I don't belong to this family of origin? Why am I here? What is it that is mine to do in this world? Well, she has these beautiful gifts and talents that when her family of origin stops disagreeing with her, when she's away from her family of origin, all of these beautiful gifts, all of this wisdom comes from her, and she has an adopted, if you will, family that needs what she has to offer the world. But she couldn't get there until she started going within, until she started taking that inner journey to find that presence within her, because we're all made in God's image and likeness. She had to dig deep through all the messages that she wasn't good enough, that she was different, that she never belonged, that, you know, blah, 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 from this family. She had to dig deep and say, okay, what is my purpose? What is my passion? What is it that you want me to do? And it started coming forth because she was receptive. She was strong in her determination to quiet the outer voices and to find the path that Spirit wanted her to express, her life's purpose, her soul's purpose. So as we are on this elder journey and we look at these events in our lives where we made decisions and we made choices, and some of those choices were easy and some of those choices were hard. Some of the events in our lives were very difficult to get through at the time, and we really needed to draw on these inner resources of strength and determination and receptivity and faith. We had to keep drawing on these inner resources, and sometimes we did and sometimes we didn't. And there's no judgment involved in any of it. It's all part of our consciousness evolution. It's all part of our journey from seeing a strictly three-dimensional world to coming back into alignment with our spiritual reality. That's all that's about. That's what this life history is about. So in this book, he talks about 3 phases of this journey of consciousness. And for the elders, it was an initiation. And we recognize the story as a hero's journey. Each one of us who did our history, who did our personal life review, we can look at that as a hero's journey. We can look at it from a non-judgmental view. The author also talks about the life perspective from the perspective of the mouse and the eagle. So sometimes when we're in the thick of it, we have the perspective of a mouse, very narrow, down to the ground. You know, we can see as far as our heads lift up. And that's all we see, very limited perspective of our world, of our lives. But when we become the eagle, the perspective is much larger. Our field of vision is much greater. When we're in that spiritual nature, when we're able to connect with the spirituality and that presence of strength and courage and determination and a willingness, we see from a bigger perspective. We get aha moments. We actually understand what it means to hear that still small voice. When we get those impressions, oh, life is more than what I thought it was. This is different than I thought it was. So we have the mouse perspective, we have the eagle perspective. As we do our inner work, our elder work, we start transforming to the eagle perspective of our lives, that I don't want to say dispassionate, but that non-judgmental observer of our lives. And we get to see all those milestones that occurred with without judgment and say, oh, this I did, I really dove deeply and I really called on resources here. This one, not so much. And because of that, life turned in on this road instead of that road. And it was an okay journey. It was just a little bumpier than it would have been had I chosen differently. No judgment involved at all about these journeys. But we want to look at the 3 phases of our personal hero's journey. And the author identifies them as severance, the neutral zone, and a reintegration. Now, the light bulb that went off in my head as I read this book was that it's very, very similar to a book called Finding Yourself in Transition by Robert Brummett. The 3 phases are endings, the void, and the new beginning. It also is very reminiscent of a book called Hell in the Hallway, Light at the Door by a minister whose name I'll remember in a minute. And those 3 phases are, I can see her face, Ellen Davenport, Reverend Ellen Davenport, thank you. The 3 phases are the door closing, the hallway, and the door opening. So in this particular book, he's focusing on our discovering our elderhood. And if we're holding on to anything that caused us to lose our vision or our life energy or that light within us, if something happened that caused that light in us to go out, that caused a joy of ours to be extinguished, then he suggests that we want to sever ourselves from the attachment to that event or that person. And how do we do that? Well, I'm going to describe a ritual later. We had at the last Sunday of the month, we did the burning bowl ceremony, and that's a very good ceremony for severance. Whatever the event, the person that caused the hurt or we caused the hurt, whatever it was that caused the light of God within us to diminish, to be covered up, he says, whatever that is, for example, using the burning bowl, write it on that paper and burn it. But before you write it on the paper, and he says to collect objects also, but be with that, whatever it is that you wrote on the paper, whatever the object is that represents that that event or that person or whatever it was that caused your light to diminish, that joy of God within you to be darkened and cloaked. He says, be with it for a little while first and infuse whatever that is with unconditional love, because you're going to be releasing it. So allow all of the feelings that were associated with that be invested in this paper, this object, or whatever. And then when you're ready, allow yourself to release it for good. Allow it to be burned or to be dissolved in water or to dig a pit and bury it. Allow whatever it is that you're releasing to be released now and forever. So that in terminology of the indigenous cultures, so that you can reclaim your soul. So that whatever part of you that was attached to that event or that person, you can now call your spirit back to yourself so that you can once again be that integrated, joyous creation of God that you came here to be. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. So, but the work of that was severance. And then once we recognize that that was a life-changing event, we can come into what this author calls the neutral zone. Other authors call the hallway, or it could be the void. It could be where we experience the dark night of the soul, because everything that we knew to be true up until that point is no longer existent in our consciousness. We can't rely on the old and familiar ways of thinking and being. That has stopped. So we're in this neutral zone. And this is where the inner work happens. This is where we get to call on Andrew, and we get to call on Peter symbolically, because we already have these gifts from God already in us, of the determination and the strength and the willingness and the openness and the being present and aware that life is more. Thank you, St. Paul, for reminding us of that. We already have all of that inside us, and we take this time in the neutral zone to really connect with it, because what we knew is no longer here and we don't know what's coming yet. So we take this time to meditate, contemplate, pray our prayers, whatever it is that we need to do to reconnect with our essence, that light of God that lives within us all. So the neutral zone is really where the wonderful work of transformation happens. And we see that finally as we see Peter being inspired by the Holy Spirit. And last week he said, I now understand that this message of the love of God in and for all of us is for all of us, not just the Jews. I understand the expansiveness of God's love. I understand the spiritual nature, the reality of eternal life. It's not just distant idea, it's a here and now reality. So we see this transformation of Peter throughout the New Testament, and then that's his transformation is in our neutral zone, so we can bring his experience within us and be that willing vessel to be inspired by God. So the last phase in this hero's journey, on our personal hero's journey, is reintegration. With the indigenous people, with the Greek tales, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell was all about the hero's journey and how that story is told over and over and over again in stories that have lived the test of time. We're still reading those stories that the Greeks wrote. But we also are on our own personal hero's journey. And like those heroes, we're the heroes of our own lives. And after all of these trials and tribulations and these wonderful things and these horrible things, we learn from them and we draw these strengths from our inner world to our physical world. And we bring back all that we have learned to give the best of our being to our communities, our children. We get to bring back our best into the world because we have experienced all of these things we have learned and grown and benefited from, as long as we do our inner work. And we give that back to the world. It's about reintegrating the new person we are, because we're not the person we used to be when we started this journey. On the other side of whatever that was that happened, we're not the same person. We've grown, and we can share what we've learned. We can share it in a letter to our children and grandchildren. Whether they want to read it or not is not our business, but we may want to write that letter. We may want to write that letter for future generations. All the wisdom that we gathered through all that we went through, the highs and the lows. So reincorporation, new beginnings, the new door opening, we step across the threshold into the newness of our newly integrated self in the awareness of the all presence of God. So, and if we're currently going through something, currently going through a major life change, an illness, whatever it might be, something that is a big deal in our lives, we can look at that history. We can do that inner journey again. We can realize that we are on our own hero's journey. And what are we learning from this process? How are we getting in closer communion with the divine throughout this whole thing? And how am I going to emerge as a new person on the other side of this? So I invite you, if you haven't done your life review yet, please do. It's a wonderful, wonderful process. And I mentioned 7-year, 7-year segments. And look at all those milestones, the happies and the sads, the life is never going to be the same agains, all of those things. And go through first with your intellectual mind, your John the Baptist mind, and then go through again with that inner, deeper, what else? Who else? I can't tell you how many dreams I've had this last week where people who were significant in my life popped up. My intellectual mind forgot all about them, but my dreams brought them up. And I was able to say, oh, yes, I was very much influenced by this one. I was very much influenced by that book. I was very much influenced in a positive way, negative way for that one, but very positive way for this one. And what did I learn from those interactions with those people? So I invite you, it's a beautiful, beautiful soul inquiry that this tool is giving us. So I invite you, if you haven't done it, to do it. Now, for our homework for this week, bring up your life review. This one is called Letting Go of the Past, using severance. So in order to move forward in our new elderhood, we still have this hero's journey to accomplish. And we want to see in our life review, in our personal history, on our hero's journey, we want to just notice if there's anything we're holding on to that is keeping us bound to the past. If the thought comes up and we're angry all over again, or the thought comes up and we're hurt all over again, or defeated all over again. So we want to give that life review, give our hero's journey another scan this week. And if there's anything that's keeping us bound to the past, we might want to hold a formal ceremony to let it go. Now, I mentioned the burning bowl, which is my favorite because I think I'm part pyromaniac. I'm not sure. I don't like buildings on fire. I'm afraid of that. Fire in the fireplace gets a little touchy, but I'm okay with flash paper or putting a piece of paper in the fireplace while it's burning. I'm okay with those things. But some folks wrote on bathroom tissue and flushed what they were releasing down the porcelain fixture. And you can also dig a hole and put something that will disintegrate over time in the hole and bury it. But the author is suggesting that we might want to find a ritual that is meaningful for us. So he says, find or create a physical object that symbolizes an old, you know how snakes shed their skin and there's just a skin carcass behind and the snake is long gone because it outgrew the limitation and the confines of its old skin? Well, that's what we're doing with the severance ritual. And honey, if you bring up the first one. So we want to find or create a physical object that symbolizes that old skin to be shed. Now, it can be, again, writing on a paper, writing on bathroom tissue, a little object, you could write a smiley face on a Post-it note or a frowny face on a Post-it note, whatever, just make a symbol. And then next one, honey, you want to spend time with this object. You want to put it in a special place for a couple of days, a few days. You want, every time you see it, you want to say, okay, this is how up until now, how I felt about that. This, with all the feeling of defeat, the feeling of I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm never going to learn anything. How could I be so incredibly stupid because this thing happened and it was my fault, or others said it was my fault when it wasn't. And up until now, I have felt demoralized and diminished, and I just shut down because of this. So whatever this is, put it on in a special place. He recommends if you have an altar in your home, where when you see the altar, it puts you in a prayerful presence, a prayerful state of mind, put it there. If there's someone somewhere special, you have indoor plants where life is brimming, you could put it there, in the sunshine, in a corner, wherever it is, someplace special, so that you can feel what it felt like to believe that circumstance about yourself, to believe that that someone or something could diminish your life essence. And then next one, honey, you want to build a fire, dig a hole, whatever it is, however you're going to release and sever your tie to the emotional impact whatever that was had on you. So you want to create an environment of release for that feeling, that emotion, and that memory. And then he says, sometimes it's helpful to have other people witness this particular ritual with you. So that is a very powerful thing, to have someone with you who can be your guardian angel, if you will, who you trust, who loves you unconditionally, and who supports you in releasing this old energy, this old snake skin that doesn't fit anymore, because you're now on an inner journey of bringing forth all of these beautiful spiritual qualities that you already have, and blossoming into your role as a spiritual elder for your community. So he says, when you bring whether you're alone or with your sacred trusted friends and family, he says, speak about the significance of this, whatever this object is, and then speak about the importance of releasing it. What would it mean to me if I were no longer affected by this? Who would I be without that old snakeskin? Who would I be without that old story? Who would I be? And really let your heart tell you, oh my gosh, every door in the possible universe is open to you once you let that go. You can shine, you can do anything you put your heart and mind to, because you let that go. You're no longer diminished by what happened there. And then finally, as you approach whatever it is, this is where Andrew comes in. We have had Simon Peter with us on the first 4 steps of this severance ritual. This is where Andrew comes in. We want to have love and commitment in releasing and severing the tie that we had with that object. And with love, because everything in our lives on our hero's journey brought us to this moment now. So we can be grateful for it. We can thank the characters for the roles they played. We can thank the events for making us dig deep within in this inner journey, so that we can learn and grow and be the blessing in the world that we came here to be however many years ago. So with that love and commitment, with Andrew's strength and determination to burn, bury, or flush, whatever that is, so that we can say with finality, it is done and I am free. So as we are free from that, the presence of God will just fill us completely, because we're no longer tied. We're no longer buried by, we are no longer influenced negatively by whatever that was. So I invite you to let go, to do the severance ritual. Anything that caused hurt or pain, anything that keeps you tied to the past, allow it to release, so that the fullness of your spiritual elderhood can flow through you to the benefit of the world. Well, that's a pretty big assignment. Some things we like to hold on to. Every once in a while, I like to be in a pity party because I think I'm gaining something from it. The only thing that I'm really gaining from it are stress hormones that are helping, Paul said, helping my physical body decline. But really, I want to have those positive hormones, those life affirming, life rebuilding. I want to feel the presence of God that we talked about in the opening prayer, the presence of God rebuilding my cells, organs, and tissues, not the stress hormones that tear them down. So I'm inviting you to do this little ritual this week. If you haven't done your life review, it is well worth the time to see how you have grown and how you have evolved. So trust each phase of this process, of this change in consciousness, of this journey within, whether it's severance or the neutral zone, or if we're already coming into the reintegration process, that door has opened, we're able to cross that threshold into our newness. Bless you on your spiritual journey. So with that, let's say our offering blessing together. Now, this is another unity prayer. So I invite you to say it with me. Divine Spirit, your love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And I am grateful. For all of you, I am grateful. So we have a closing hymn, number 608, Lord of our growing years, and Elda is leading us in the singing of this hymn as well.
Lord of our growing years,
Jim, are you sharing the sound?
with us from infancy, laughter and quick delight is freshness and energy. Your grace surrounds us all our days, for all your gifts we bring our praise. Lord of our strongest years, stretching our youthful powers, lovers and pioneers, when all the world seems ours. Your grace surrounds us all our days, for all your gifts we bring our praise. Lord of our closing years, always your promise stands. Hold us when death appears safely within your hands. Your grace surrounds us all our days, for all your gifts we bring our praise.
Once again, we thank you, Elda, for your beautiful music. And before we do our closing prayer, I would like to invite our team members and Winter Chapel Board Committee members to stay after our chat session so that we can have a team meeting. So, all right, so let us say our closing prayer together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. And when we remember that God is, everywhere present. Where when we remember that we are made in the image and likeness of God, we discover that all is well. So have a great week. Have fun with your severance ritual. If you decide that there are some things that you need to release, be sure to call on Simon, Peter, and Andrew for receptivity and listening for the voice of the Holy Spirit to guide you, and then the strength and determination to act on that guidance. So have a lovely week, everyone. God bless you.